each of us can do. At Project Maverick, at LawSikho, our aim is providing free training for law aspirant for all law entrance examination. I'm Harsh on this side, Project Lead Maverick. Today we have with us Mr. Abhinav Singh Negi, who's an alumnus of NSIU Bangalore, and he is a GK faculty who has been taking these current affairs sessions with us. Today in this session at this moment, he will be discussing about art and culture. It's a few of the important current affairs related to art and culture, which will be important for common law admission tests 2020 and 2021 to follow. Over to you, sir.
So hi guys. So in today's video, I want to talk to you about certain things that have happened in the world of art and culture. But at the very outset, I want to tell you that art and culture is fairly tricky because the issue is, let's say, we're going to be discussing obviously a lot of, let's say, important art forms, traditional forms of painting, maybe a form of puppetry or dance forms, etc. Okay, so that is fine. If it's been in the news, I will discuss it with you. However, there is also another important section in art and culture, which is the sort of festivals that are conducted throughout the country every year. Different tribes have different festivals, different states have different festivals, and the nature of these festivals is obviously that these are an annual event, right? So obviously every festival in this country becomes a part of current affairs. So I've tried to cover some festivals, but I'd highly recommend that you try to go through a list of festivals. At least you should know at least which festival takes as a part of which state and which community takes part in what festival, right? So these are the sort of tricky issues with art and culture. Otherwise, wherever there is anything that I deem fit, I will cover here. So when we talk about art and culture, like if you look at the videos that we've done till now, our videos have generally had an overarching theme. Let's say if you're talking about international relations, then we'd cover 3 countries, or we talk about the agrarian crisis and then try to cover a lot of things, or we talk about climate change and try to cover anything and everything, right, from environmental issues to economic issues of climate change, right? However, when we talk about art and culture, there is no broad theme as such in general, right? Because a lot of small little things and small little developments keep on happening in the world of art and culture. So in today's video, I'll be talking to you about these scattered developments that have taken place. Maybe in the next lecture that we do on art and culture, I would want to specifically focus on UNESCO, because there is a list of heritage sites that UNESCO has come up with. I want to talk to you about the important heritage sites in India, and then a lot of other things that UNESCO has been doing in the field of art and culture, and that effort of UNESCO is also complemented by the effort of the Archaeological Survey of India, and what exactly is the Archaeological Survey of India, etc. All of that will probably take a session which will be titled as Art and Culture too. But till then, in this particular session, I will tell you about small little important things, and I'll tell you how these things can come in your exam and how to study for these particular things and things of like nature. Okay, so let's begin with the first thing that I want to talk to you about. It is about the megalith culture. Okay, so I'm starting with this topic because I want to tell you that in the world of art and culture and the form of traditional, let's say, excavations, etc., that have been carried out across the world, you have a lot of cultures that keep on emerging. There are archaeological finds that you have. Now, obviously, most of history is not written, right? Like written history is fairly recent, but there are things that have happened way in the past, like let's say 2000, 3000, 4000, 5000 years ago, about which there are not a lot of records. So what people do is that they look at artifacts that are excavated, they look at statues, monuments, stone structures, etc., and try to, let's say, sort of figure out the sort of life that these people were living. Okay, so yeah. So let me talk to you about the first topic today. It's about megalith culture. Okay, so what I want to tell you here is that you should look at what the word megalith means. Mega obviously means big, and lith means stone. Okay, so megalith would be large stone, and the culture that would be associated with megaliths would be the sort of culture and the sort of cultural knowledge that you can decipher from the sort of megalithic excavations that have taken place. Okay, so megaliths are found globally. Okay, so recently a new menhir, which is one type of monolith, it was found on the Pothamala hills in the Kerala Tamil Nadu border. Okay, therefore I'm gonna have to talk about the megalith culture, because in the world of archaeology this was a fairly big event. So let's talk about what menhirs are. So menhirs are basically monolithic slabs. Now mono means one and lithic means related to stone. So these are singular slabs that are erected above the ground. They could be either small or gigantic at height, and they're a feature of the megalith culture. Okay. So what is megalith? Megalith, as the name suggests, is basically one large stone. Okay, so it includes different kinds of monuments. Jisme there is one common thing that they have to be made out of large, roughly dressed slabs of stone. Okay, now these monuments have been found in various parts of the world. You have them in Europe in the form of the Stonehenge. Like the Stonehenge is one of the figures that a lot of people have been writing about. Now, obviously, it happens to occur in a part of the world that a lot of media also focuses on, but there have been similar megalithic excavations here in India, in South Asia, in Indonesia, and multiple places, right? So Stonehenge is a type of megalith, and therefore you try to look at them, try to, let's say, gauge the sort of engineering capabilities that people had at that point of time. Then that gives you an idea as to the level of advancement of a society. So therefore you try to read into and deduce some form of information for from these megaliths. Okay, so, and it's not that these megaliths are absent in India, and this menhir is the first of a kind megalith that was found in India. You should know that Indian subcontinent, megaliths have been found over the years. They occur in the far south, and they occur in the Deccan Plateau region, in the Vindhya Aravali ranges, and in northwestern parts of India. Okay, so these are fairly spread out all across India. And the megalith sites that you see in India are dated to a period ranging from 1300 BC to 12th century CE. So 1300 BC would be roughly 3400 years ago. So we've had megaliths from about 3,500 years ago. Okay. Now, this practice of megaliths is not something that is extinguished now. It's not that megaliths are not made anymore in the world. You have certain tribal communities in India that till today make some megaliths. So, for example, there is the Khasi tribes in Meghalaya and the Munda tribes of the Chota Nagpur Plateau region. So, now from this particular piece of knowledge or piece of information that I've shared from you, there are certain things that you should derive. One is that you should know that there are the Pothamala hills in the Kerala and Tamil Nadu border. That could be a part of the question. Then you should know what megaliths are, what are the specific kind of megaliths that you find in India. So you have many heaps. And then you should also know that there are certain tribal communities in India which continue to make use of these megalithic practices. Now, obviously, there can anyways and any day be a question on the important tribes in India. So herein, I'm mentioning two tribes, the Khasi tribes of Meghalaya and the Mundas of Chota Nagpur. And obviously, these are not the only tribes in India. There are a list of tribes in India. So you should be fairly well aware of. So if there is any news article about, let's say, a dam being built, or any, let's say, any sort of government activity being undertaken which would undermine or interfere with the lives of any tribal communities, or let's say there is some art form which becomes famous which is associated with certain tribe, so obviously you have to keep in mind at least the basic information about which state of the country does that tribe belong to. Okay, so these are the questions that can very easily be asked in any question that is there in art and culture. Okay, so moving on, let's look at the recent developments in the field of art particularly. Okay, so now I want to talk to you about Pattachitra art. Okay, so in 2009 April, so recently we've had the cyclone Amphan, but before cyclone Amphan there was cyclone Fani which occurred around April 26, 2019. Okay, now it hit the coastal villages of Odisha. Now obviously there were a lot of new newspaper articles about the sort of destruction and to the and Delhi, and basically laying out the details about the extent of damage caused by the Fani cyclone. But there were a lot of articles that were published in the Hindu and in Indian Express both, which talked about how this traditional cloth-based scroll painting art form from Odisha called the Pattachitra art was also damaged, in the sense that a lot of samples of this art form, etc., were damaged during this cyclone. Right? So therefore, this is how you have to read newspaper articles. So if you are looking at a disaster, let's say like a cyclone, there would be some newspaper articles which talk about the sort of regions that it affected. It could talk about the economic impacts of those let's say disasters. It could talk about the sort of technologies that government of India has put in place to, let's say, deal with those disasters, or they could focus on, let's say, the sort of animals that were affected, the sort of tribes that were affected, and any, let's say, forms of art like the Panchrath art belonging to Odisha that was affected, right? So this is how you have to read newspaper articles, and this is how you have to digest these newspaper articles. So from this particular set of articles, there are certain important information that comes out with regards to the Patachitra art form. Now, okay, so Patachitra art form is an art form. Once again, so with it begin, it's an art form with the ornamentation of Lord Jagannath in the innermost sanctum of the Jagannath Puri temple. Okay, so Jagannath is the most important deity in Odisha. Okay, now there are certain facts that I will tell you about Patachitra art. I don't see a lot of questions specifically being asked about it, but it's an interesting art form. You should be aware of it because it talks to you and it gives you, let's say, the sort of diversity and beauty and diversity that exists in India, and it explains to you the beauty and the effort that is put behind these paintings. Okay. So in Patachitra art form, the artists never use pencil or charcoal for preliminary drawings. There is no rough work. They just get to work. That talks to you about the level of skill that these Patachitra artists have. Then when the painting is being started, they don't start with the subject first. The first thing that is painted is the borders of the painting. Okay, and then there are certain processes under which are undertaken on the painting, and therefore the painting becomes water resistant and durable, and it also gives it a shining finish. Now please imagine the extent of the cyclone Fani, that water resistant and durable paintings have also been lost, and there is a threat to this particular form of art. Okay, now another very important thing is that there is a continuation of, let's say, the tone or the color tone that is being used. There are not a lot of different sort of tones of color that are being used. So therefore there is a single tone of color, and this makes the paintings very pleasant to the eye. Okay, now then another interesting thing is that the materials used in this painting, because obviously it is an old form of art, so obviously these are not commercially available paints or materials. The materials are paints that are made from vegetables, they are made from earth, in the sense that they are made from the soil, they are made from coal, they are made, red paint is made from red sand, etc. So natural sources are used. Now this is an example of what a Patachitra painting looks like. You can see that there is a fairly even let's say tone of color that is being used. Okay, now because Patachitra is a form of scroll painting, now another thing that becomes really important is that it is not the only form of scroll painting that happens in India. There are obviously another set of scroll paintings that happen because of the diversity of the country. There is seldom anything which is very unique. There are a lot of other forms of scroll painting, and here I am listing out a few. For example, Kalamkari is related to Andhra Pradesh. Then you have Kali Ghat paintings which are related to Bengal. Then you have Fard paintings from Rajasthan. Similarly, you have Cherial paintings from Telangana, and Pichwai paintings, form of scroll painting, again from Rajasthan. So this is not an exhaustive list. Okay, there would be other forms of scroll painting. So if you see them in the newspaper, or if you are able, if you have, let's say, any sort of reference material that you're referring to, please try to remember these, because these can fairly be a question in your current affairs paper. Okay. Then another form of art form that I want to talk to you about is the Bagru block painting. Okay, so now obviously this is not the only kind of block. So block painting is basically when wooden slabs, etc. are used, and then the designs on those slabs are used to, let's say, have leaves or some sort of a print on a paper or a piece of cloth. Okay, now this is obviously not the only Bagru block. Bagru painting is not the only sort of painting, but it becomes important because recently the Union Textile Minister, so the central minister, inaugurated this museum called Titawala Museum in Bagru, which showcases the Chippa community's hand block painting. Okay, so Chippa community is a very specific community. It's a very specific caste that comes from Rajasthan, and this is the sort of art form that they practice. And this art form, the knowledge about this art form and the expertise is passed through generations. Okay, so it is traditionally inherited in a family. Okay, so what exactly is Bagru? It's a traditional technique of printing with natural colors. It is undertaken, as I told you, by the Chippa community in Bagru village of Rajasthan. Okay, now traditionally the motifs, so the word motif basically means design. Okay, so these motifs are large with bold lines, and they include wildflowers, buds, leaves, and they have geometrical patterns. Okay, so you should also be generally aware of the sort of, let's say, patterns or motifs that they have, because obviously this will be used to differentiate the sort of paintings that they have. But obviously I don't expect the CLAT consortium to ask you such a deep question wherein they ask you to differentiate between the motifs of two different styles of painting. So out of this, I think the most important thing that CLAT could ask you, because the union minister inaugurated the museum, they could say that the Titawala museum is in so and so state, and then you should obviously know it is in Rajasthan. Or they could say that the Bagru block painting art form is related to so and so state, and then also you should know that the state is Rajasthan. Okay. Now, as I told you, obviously Bagru is not the only block painting, but since the union minister has inaugurated a museum which is dedicated to one kind of block painting, you should also focus on the other forms of block painting that are popular in India. So let's say from Gujarat, you have the Ajrak print. Then Rajasthan has another set of block paintings. You have Sanganeri, Ajrak, Dabu. MP has Bagh print, Piogat print, and Andhra Pradesh has Kalamkari. Okay, so if you can remember, try to remember these names, because it's a probable question that they can ask, because the union minister has gone ahead and inaugurated a museum for this. Okay, so this is what a Bagru block painting looks like. You can see that the artisan is using prefabricated wooden blocks, and very meticulously he's, let's say, stamping and printing these designs on cloth. So now so these are the two art forms that I found that were very useful. So this data is from basically May 2019 to February 2020. So anything and everything that has happened in the world of art and culture after February 2020, obviously I'll be covering in a couple of videos that we do in art and culture a little later. Okay. So now I want to talk about certain festivals. Now the deal with festivals is that festivals happen every year. Therefore, these are always going to be a part of current affairs. So I will try to cover the most important festivals, in the sense the biggest festivals and the sort of festivals that are now becoming prominent because the things associated with the festival have been in the news. But again, this is not an exhaustive list. The questions that could be asked from here could be, let's say, they could be based on any festival that I might not be able to cover, and it's practically impossible also for me to cover all the festivals that are celebrated in such a diverse country like India. So doing a good cost benefit analysis, I'm going to give you the festivals that I think are the most important, by virtue of the fact that the festivals themselves or any values or things associated with them have been in the news. Okay. So the first is the Ambubachi Mela. Now, Ambubachi Mela is the biggest religious festival of Eastern India and the border state of Assam, and it was celebrated recently with pomp and fervor. Okay. So the Ambubachi Mela is a 4-day festival which is celebrated in the Kamakhya temple. Okay, so Kamakhya temple is atop the Nilachali hills of Guwahati, Assam, on the banks of Brahmaputra river. Like, it's a site to be visited. Like, I personally visited the Kamakhya temple. So it is one of the 51 Shakti shrines which represent the different body parts of Shiva's wife Sati. Okay. So Kamakhya temple obviously is related to Hindu mythology. So it is said that when goddess Sati was born and she died, her body parts fell to different parts of the earth, part of India, of the Indian subcontinent, and each shrine or part with the 51 shrines there wherein each body part fell is now a Shakti shrine. Okay. So this temple is believed to be the site where her womb and genitals fell after she burnt herself to death. Now the tank, so therefore the temple's sanctum sectorum, which is like the main house, it houses the yoni or the female genital, which is symbolized by a rock. Okay, so during this 4-day Ambubachi Mela, it is believed that Devi Kamakhya, who is also the goddess of fertility, goes through her annual cycle of menstruation. Okay, so earlier on, what used to happen was there used to be a widespread practice of animal sacrifice in the Ambubachi Mela in the Kamakhya temple, right? However, in India, it is now illegal to kill an animal for sacrifice unless and until you're going to consume that animal for food after that, right? Now, because the sheer volume of animals that people used to get to the Kamakhya temple was so much, obviously you could not consume those many animals. So people have off late, because of, let's say, societal pressures, because of legal pressures, people have stopped this practice of sacrificing animals in the Kamakhya temple. But earlier on, this 4-day event used to be a bloodbath, and the blood from all these animals used to flow down the stairs of the temple. And it was, and that flow of blood symbolized the annual menstrual cycle of the Kamakhya Devi. Okay. So Ambubachi Mela in that sense is a very important festival because it generally is in the news because of the sheer scale of the festival and the animal sacrifice that used to happen here. Okay. Now, recently a very important festival was also, so I'm going to focus on a lot of northeastern Indian festivals because a lot of the other festivals like, let's say, Baisakhi or Pongal, etc., people have a fairly good idea of because you've been reading about them generally in your NCRTs, right? So I don't think I need to tell you the vibe, how and what Pongal is. It's basically a harvest festival, and similarly I don't need to tell you about Baisakhi, which is a harvest festival of farmers which are celebrated in Punjab. I'm assuming that you guys have read some NCRTs and you're fairly aware of these things. So I'm going to talk to you about things which have been in the news. Okay. So Lai Haroba festival was in the news because of the grand scale of this festival. Now it's a 5-day ritualistic festival, which is observed and celebrated by the Manipuri Methi communities. Okay, so Methi communities are the dominant community in Manipur. So the language that the Methi community speaks, or Methi Boli, is also what we call as Manipuri. Okay. So Lai Haroba means the festivity of the gods or merrymaking of the gods. So basically you should know that Lai Haroba is associated with Manipur. I don't think that the questions that are going to be asked will be beyond this. Okay. Now this festival obviously is observed to honor the Umang Lai deity of the state. She is the local deity which people revere in the state of Manipur. Okay. Now there is this another very interesting festival that happened recently. It's called Zokutui. Okay, now I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly because I've only read about these festivals. So the government of Mizoram organized Zokutui, the festival, in 10 states across India, and it was organized in countries like US, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. Now, because it was celebrated at such a large scale, 10 states of India celebrating a Mizo festival, and that also being celebrated in US, Myanmar, and Bangladesh, that obviously makes it important enough for us to know what the festival is all about. Okay. So you should know that Zokutui is associated with Mizoram. Okay. Now this festival is basically an attempt wherein to, let's say, give a message of brotherhood and unison across the various Mizo tribes that are living in different parts of the world. Okay. So you should know Zokutui is associated with Mizoram. Then another very important and all-encompassing festival was the Adhi Mahatsav. Okay, so Adhi stands for tribe. So Adhi Mahotsav literally stands for a tribal festival. Okay. So the National Tribal Festival, Adhi Mahotsav, was organized by Government of India. Now it was organized as a joint initiative between obviously the Union Ministry of Tribal Affairs and this very important body called the Tribal Cooperative Market Development Federation of India, or TriFed. Now, I'm going to talk to you about TriFed in a little detail because I expect some sort of question can be asked on what the TriFed is, under what ministry does it work, and what is the mandate of the TriFed. Okay. So the Adi Mahotsav is a festival which is basically like an exhibition come sale of tribal handicrafts, art, paintings, fabrics, etc. Right. So obviously the Indian states wants to support the tribes. The Indian states wants to ensure that tribes are over a period of time they are integrated into the mainstream. At the same time, they want to grant the tribe certain autonomy to preserve their own culture, etc. Right. So obviously the TriFed, along with the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, they try to bring these tribes, as in they try to foster interaction between these tribes and the other citizens of the country, which would benefit both of them in the sense that there would be people to people contacts, and also it would economically benefit these tribes because now they can showcase their skills, their paintings, their fabric, their jewelry and handicrafts to the world. Okay. So the theme of the Adi Mahotsav was a celebration of the spirit of tribal culture, craft, cuisine, and commerce, right? Obviously, so it was like a large festival wherein you had people could try different cuisines from different tribal cultures. As in commerce is also a fairly important thing. So they wanted to promote certain cottage industries that these tribals have been performing over the years so that they can put in more money in the hands of the tribals, which would ensure that they lead a better quality of life and their integration with mainstream India becomes much easier. Okay. Now, obviously, the Adhi Mahatsav is important because it was also tied to, let's say, the Digital India initiative that the government of India has been working on anyways. Now, in this Mahatsav, they wanted to bring more tribes in interaction, more tribes closer to the sort of digital technologies and platforms that we have. And they also wanted the general public to know and be aware, and a lot of businesses to be aware of that you can conduct businesses with these tribes, because these tribes are fairly, let's say, educated now, and they're integrated enough into the mainstream that they are able to use these technological platforms, and there should be more of an interaction and exchanges between the mainstream and these tribes. Okay, so now let's look at TriFed in a little detail. Now, obviously, TriFed works under the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. It was established in 1987. Now, the main purpose and the main mandate of the TriFed is to market development of tribal products, okay, which includes tribal arts and craft. And the brand name that is used when TriFed markets these products, whether domestically or globally, is called Tribes India. Okay. Now, obviously, it is an agency that also facilitates import and export and also interstate trade of tribal products. So obviously, TriFed basically is like an economic or a commercial extension or a help provided by Government of India to these tribes. Okay. So now another important festival that I want to talk to you about is the Melakir Bhavani. Now, Melakir Bhavani becomes important because of late there have been, with the removal of Article 370, the lot of newspapers have been talking about the exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits and the sort of plight that was suffered, that the Kashmiri Pandits suffered, right? So there were a lot of newspaper articles on the issue of the Kashmiri Pandit exodus and on Jammu Kashmir generally and on Article 370. So in a couple of newspaper articles, I picked up the mention of this Melakir Bhavani that is celebrated. Okay, so Melakir Bhavani basically is an important festival which is celebrated around Zesht Ashtami, and it is one of the biggest religious festivals of the Kashmiri Pandits. Now, this was held recently in the Ragna Devi temple in Jammu Kashmir. So basically, you should know that Melakir Bhavani is associated with Jammu Kashmir, more specifically with the Kashmiri Pandit community. Okay. Now, there are certain things that I've written here in the sense that during this festival, what the Kashmiri Pandits do is that they visit 5 other temples, which are in Tulmula in Gandarbal district, Tikkar in Kuparwara, Laktipura, Ashmukam in Anantnag, and Mata Tirup Sundari Devsar and Mata Kheer Bhavani Masgam in Kulgaon district of JNK. Okay. So another very interesting festival that has been in the news because it gets a lot of international attention as well is called the Hornbill Festival. Okay, so it is the largest celebration of the indigenous warrior tribes and the warrior culture of the tribes of Nagaland. Okay, so the main idea behind this Hornbill Festival is to portray to the world and, let's say, revive and protect the rich cultural heritage of Nagaland and display to the world the richness of its traditions. Okay. So this festival is organized every year in the first week of December. Now, Hornbill is a very important bird. It's a big bird. It has a very long beak. You can Google Hornbill. I forgot to put a picture of that bird. Now, in the Naga culture, it is a venerated, or like it's a sacred sort of bird species. Okay, and it's important in the sense that they have helmets made out of helmets and attires, etc., which are made out of the feathers and different body parts of hornbills, right? So this festival is it's a very large and very attractive festival and gets a lot of international press attention. So herein also you should know Hornbill Festival is associated with Nagaland. Hornbill comes from the name of this bird that is venerated or celebrated or considered auspicious in the Naga culture. Okay. Now, another very important festival that I want to talk to you about is the Suraj Kund International Crafts Mela. Okay, so if there is a Mela in India which has the status of an international crafts Mela, then you should obviously be aware of it. Okay, so it is the largest crafts fair in the world. Now, it's being organized since 1987. Okay, and it basically is there to showcase the richness and the diversity of handcrafts, handlooms, and cultural heritage of India. Okay, now it is obviously organized at the at Suraj Kun town in Faridabad district of Haryana. Okay, so now this was 2020 edition. I don't know if it will happen because actually it has already happened. Sorry. So for the 24th Suraj Kund edition, the theme was the state of Himachal Pradesh, and a lot of the arts and crafts of Himachal Pradesh was put up at display. So the Suraj Kun fair attained an international status in 2013, and as of now, about people from 20 countries participate in this fair. Okay, so this obviously is organized by Haryana Tourism along with the Ministry of Tourism, Textile Cultures, and obviously Ministry of External Affairs is also involved, because now it is a festival of international significance. So basically, you should know Suraj Kund International Crafts Mela happens in Haryana. It is of an international character, and the theme for this year was the state of Himachal Pradesh. That's pretty much all you need to know about this. Okay. Then, if you have been following the news, there have been news articles about this guy in Tamil Nadu and another guy in Karnataka who was racing with buffaloes. And people say that, oh, this guy has been running so fast, the Sports Authority of India should train him and he can beat Usain Bolt, etc. Right? So therefore, I want to talk to you about 3 traditional animal sports in India, particularly from South India, which you should be aware of, because there is a chance of a question being asked. So Jallikattu is a traditional bull chasing or bullfighting sport of Tamil Nadu, which is organized during the harvest festival of Pongal. Now Jallikattu has been in the news for the last 3-4 years because some people think that it's an act of cruelty towards the bull, and some people want it to be banned. However, others say that you should respect our tradition, and this is something that we've been doing for ages. Okay. Now, another important festival is another important event is the Kambala, which is the local bull race in Tamil Nadu, wherein you had this guy who was racing with bulls, and people said that, oh, his time is so good that he could probably challenge and beat Usain Bolt. Then similarly, you have this another festival called Eruthu Vidhum Visa. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's the annual buffalo race which is held in Karnataka. Okay, so obviously there would be a lot of other animal sports that are practiced in India, but these 3 have been in the news recently, and it's very likely that there could be a question pertaining to this. So you should know what the names of these festivals are, and which states are these sports are, and which states are associated with these sports. Okay. Then I want to talk to you about the Makar Vilakku festival also. Now it is the 2-month-long annual festival of the Sabarimala temple, which is celebrated on Makar Sankranti. I think one of the faculty members from LawSikho also has done a video for you guys about the Sabarimala issue, because obviously the Sabarimala issue has been in the news. Now, obviously, if the Sabarimala issue has been in the news, the cultural festival associated with Sabarimala, which is the Makar Vilakku festival, you should just be aware of it, that Makar Vilakku festival is associated with Sabarimala. Now, as the last thing in this video, I want to talk to you about the city or township of Mallapuram, also known as Mahabalipuram. Okay. So a lot of things have happened between India and China of late. I'm talking about the border disputes. We've already covered that. But right before that happened, it looked like there is a thaw in India-China relationship. And there were informal summits between India and China. So for the first summit, there our Prime Minister Modi ji, he went to China. I think it's known as the Wuhan Unofficial Summit. And for the second summit, the Chinese Premier Xi Jinping, he came to India, and he came to the city of Mamallapuram, also known as Mahabalipuram. And it is said that the city of Mahabalipuram has historical links to China. So let's talk about the significance or the historical links between Mahabalipuram and China. Okay. So Mahabalipuram is one of the major port cities, and it had become very big by the 7th century, so approximately 1400 years ago, within the Pallava kingdom. Okay, so this town was named after the Pallava king Narasimhavarman I, who is also known as Mamalla, and therefore it became Mamallapuram. Now the name of the king Narasimhavarma I is important because Mamallapuram is named after him. Secondly, he is also a pioneer of a form of architecture that we'll be covering in the next couple of slides. So please remember the name of the Pallava king Narasimhavarman I. Okay. Now, some of you might say that history is not a part of our syllabus, but there is this very important line in your syllabus which says historical events of continuing significance. Okay, so there was this dude called Narasimhavarman. It is a historical event, but because Xi Jinping has visited Mahabalipuram, and there were a lot of newspaper articles outlining the traditional richness of Mahabalipuram, therefore this becomes a part of your syllabus. Okay. So if you look at records and data and a lot of numismatic evidence, numismatic is basically related to coins. Okay, so the sort of evidence that you have seen, the Pallava kings and the Chinese had a trade relationship, and they also had a defense relationship. Okay. Now, the Pallava king said that they would help China to keep a check on the growth of Tibet as a powerful nation. Okay. So there were trade and defense ties with China. Now, a lot of archaeologists and historians have shown that obviously Mamallapuram had commercial links with a lot of countries like China, Sri Lanka, etc. And this is based on numismatic evidence, in the sense that coins from the Pallava kingdom have been found in those countries, and coins from contemporary kings of those times from those countries have been found in Mahabalipuram. Okay. Now, the famous Chinese traveler, he's mentioned in NCRT. I hope you've read the NCRT. Is Yun Sang. He visited the region during the rule of Narasimha Varman I. Okay, so who Yun Sang was? It's mentioned, I think, in the 6th to 8th or 10th NCRT, which I think you should be aware of. Okay, so then another person, Bodhidharma, who basically is said to have taken the idea of Buddhism to China. He went to China. Now we know, you should know that Buddhism originated in India. Okay, so obviously he traveled to China and spread the idea of Buddhism there. So it is said that he used the ports of Tamil Nadu. Most likely he set sail from Mamallapuram itself and went to Guangzhou in 527 AD and then propagated Buddhism over there. So now having covered the importance of Mahabalipuram, and I've given you the event of political significance that happened there, let's also look at the architectural heritage of Mamallapuram. Now, there are 3-4 structures that I want to talk to you about in Mahabalipuram. So all of them are basically now a part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. Okay, so Mahabalipuram is culturally and traditionally a very rich town. So UNESCO comes up with this list called the UNESCO World Heritage Site. It says that these monuments are so beautiful and so grand that it is a common heritage of all mankind. Like everybody, so it's like a commonwealth of everyone, in the sense that this signifies the cultural development and the cultural diversity of this planet. Okay, so a lot of these structures in Mahabalipuram have become a part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. What exactly is the UNESCO World Heritage Site? I think we will do that in a separate video, because that itself will be a big topic. And I mentioned in the beginning of this video that I'll talk to you about the UNESCO World Heritage Site. So most likely next week we will cover that particular aspect of art and architecture. Oh, sorry, art and culture. Okay. So let's look at the Shore Temple. Now it is a temple that was built around 728 AD. Now it is built by Narasimha Varman II. Okay, who was the successor of Narasimha Varma I. It is classified as the UNESCO World Heritage Site. So this is what the Shore Temple looks like. Basically, it is next to the shore. Therefore, it is known as a Shore Temple. And UNESCO thinks that it is a structure worthy of being preserved as a common heritage of mankind. Okay. Now, then you have Panchrath. Now, Panchrath is also an example of monolithic Indian rock cut architecture. Now, monolithic means only one piece of rock was used. Okay, so these are not built using bricks. It is traditional rock cut architecture wherein they had one big stone and they decided to carve out a structure out of that one large piece of stone. Okay. Now, this complex was carved, the Panchrath complex was carved out during the reign of Narasimha Varma I. Remember Narasimha Varma I, who is also known as Mamalla, after whom itself the city or town of Mamallapuram is named. Okay. Now, Narasimha Varma I is very important because this idea of monolithic buildings, or this architectural tradition of carving out buildings and structures using one large stone itself, this idea is associated with Narasimha Varma I of the Pallava dynasty. Okay. Now this also is a part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. So Panchrath obviously has 5 complexes. All of them resemble a chariot. Okay. Now sometimes a lot of people refer or mistake them to be referred to as temples, but these temples have never been consecrated. So consecrated basically means where the king or the priest or a chief political entity comes and inaugurates the temple, so to speak. You have a spiritual function there, and after that the site becomes a temple, right? Now this never happened because the structure also wasn't completed, because Narasimha Varman died before this happened. Okay. Now, unofficially, the structures are named after the Panch Pandavas and their common wife Draupadi. However, there is nothing related to it. It's just a eulogy given to the Pandavas. So this is what the Panchrath structure looks like. Mind you, this is carved out of a single piece of rock. Okay, no, nothing apart from, nothing was moved from anywhere. No bricks came in here. No sculptures were imported. This is all carved out from one piece of rock. Now, then you have another structure called Arjunas Penis. So this measures 27 meters by 9 meters. It is the largest bas relief in the world. Okay. So relief is basically a form of sculpture wherein the base of the sculpture and the let's say the structure that protrudes out of this stone out of the sculpture is the same. Okay, so basically it's only like, let's say if let me, how do I put it? Let's say there is a large stone and then I start sculpting out of it, and I don't use any other material. I don't bring in any foreign material and stick it to that stone. That form of sculpture is known as relief. And bas relief is one specific kind of relief wherein the nose and the eyes, etc., are not dug in very deep, so that it gives you a good perspective of that red relief if you view it from multiple angles. Okay, so bas reliefs are found across the world. If you find them in Greek culture, etc. So Arjuna's penis is the largest bas relief structure in the world. Okay, it has hundreds sculptures of gods, etc. Now it illustrates an instance where in Mahabharata, so in the Mahabharata, the great epic of Mahabharata, Arjun performed a rigorous prayer to Lord Shiva and said, "Please give me the powerful bow and arrow so that I can destroy the Kauravas." Okay, so this story or this instant is engraved into this relief, and therefore it is known as Arjuna's parents. And this monument is also known as the descent of the Ganga, because it also depicts another scene from Hindu mythology where King Bhagirath is praying so that the Lord brings down the river Ganga to the earth to please the soul of his ancestors. Okay, so these two events are portrayed in Arjuna's penis. Now, this relief was created when Narsimha Varma I defeated the Chalukya king Pulakesi II. So this is what this relief looks like. This could either be a depiction of, let's say, Arjuna's penis, or this could be a depiction of Bhagirath's prayer for Ganga to be brought down to the surface of the earth. Okay. Now there is another structure that you find here, which is the Vraha cave, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is a rock-cut cave temple of the 7th century. This is what the entrance to the cave temple looks like. So it is also, this is the entry to the cave temple. Okay. Now it is called the Vraha cave because it depicts Lord Vishnu. One of the Lord Vishnu's form is of a Vraha or a boar, wherein he is rescuing Bhudevi or Mother Earth from the seas. So this temple describes that incident, and this is also UNESCO World Heritage Site. So this is pretty much it, guys, that I had to talk to you about in this video. Most likely I will try to cover anything and everything of importance in art and culture in the next couple of videos. Okay, so thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, sir, for
You're
this
welcome.
particular session on art and culture. I understand this is very, very important for other entrance examination as well as, and to the CLAT aspirant as
Yeah,
well. Uh, kids, see you tomorrow again
but
at 4.
yeah,
Yeah,
but there's one thing I want to tell the
yeah,
kids who are watching this. Art and culture obviously is one of the most boring things, okay, to read for any form of exam. So please don't get disheartened, because the thing with art and culture is that I tell you to focus on art and culture because honestly speaking, बाकी में आप तुक्का मार सकते हैं. There are things that you can guess, like in contemporary history you can guess. If there is something out of any newspaper articles you can guess, but in art and culture it's very hard for you to guess. So you have to put in the hard work to be able to answer those questions. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Thank you, guys.
yeah. See you tomorrow again with a session on legal reasoning. The topic for the session will be Consumer Protection Act 2019. Thank you so much, sir.